It's been a while since I covered a good alien encounter, and this one is definitely very odd and one of my favorites. In 1974, 41-year-old Carl Hidgen was out in the woods of Wyoming doing some hunting, and one day while talking to some other hunters, he decided to go in a very remote area of the Medicine Bow National Forest, a place he wasn't that familiar with, but his curiosity paid off as he saw 5 elk not too long after entering this area, and one of them was a large male, so Carl got out his rifle and shot at it, but something very strange happened. Carl stated that the bullet only went about 50 feet, then it just dropped to the ground, and also the rifle made no noise and produced no kickback, and he was able to see the bullet move in a slow motion-like state before it hit an unseen barrier. Carl also said that the air around him felt electric. Now Carl, scared and confused, walked over to where his bullet fell, and he saw that the bullet was squashed, so it must have hit something, but there was nothing there. Then he heard a twig snapping to his right, so Carl looked and saw what he thought was a man standing in the shadows of the trees. But he soon realized that this was not a man. Whatever this was stood about 6 feet tall, had antlers on top of its head, very odd-looking facial features, had no neck, and was wearing a black one-piece outfit that Carl would later describe as a scuba diving wetsuit. This entity also had long arms with what looked like a drill bit for a hand on the right side, and on the left side there was no hand at all. Now while Carl just stood there frozen in fear, this humanoid creature stepped forward and said in perfect English, "How you doing?" And Carl said back in a slightly scared tone, "Pretty good." Then this entity nodded and started to move closer. Then he asked Carl if he was hungry, and before Carl could reply, it took out a plastic packet. Then this packet levitated right towards Carl, and Carl grabbed it and saw that there were 4 pills inside. Then the alien said that 1 pill would be enough nutrition for 1 day, and Carl, hungry, ate one, then put the rest in his pocket. Then this creature introduced himself and told Carl that his name was Also One. Now at this time, Carl could see a strange-looking craft behind this alien, and to Carl, it looked like a huge Christmas package. It was like a box, but Carl couldn't see any landing gear or even an entrance. It was only about 5 feet high, 7 feet long, and about 4.5 feet wide. Then Also One asked Carl if he would like to go for a ride, and before he could respond, Carl claims that he must have instantly teleported inside the box-shaped craft. As next thing he knew, he was inside. He was also shocked that he was able to fit. Then he saw that his hands and feet were strapped down with bands, and Carl started to freak out. And as he was looking around, he saw the 5 elk, but they were like frozen in time. Then he realized that he wasn't alone. There was another alien of the same race as Also One inside this craft with him. And this alien came in and put some sort of helmet on Carl. Then this craft took off and Carl could see that they were right over his truck. Then his truck just vanished. Then he saw Also One point with his drill bit hand, and Carl looked into his dread. They were now flying into outer space. And not too long after Earth faded from view, they approached an alien planet. And Also One told Carl that this planet was 163,000 light miles away from Earth. Then they approached this huge tower that was emitting a brilliant light, and it was also producing a strange sort of buzzing sound. Carl later stated, all around this tower were revolving patterns of multicolored lights, not unlike powerful spotlights. They were so intense that it was actually painful to keep my eyes open. These lights were so brilliant that I held my hands to my face as a protective shield. I vaguely remember shouting, "Shut them off, they're burning me." Carl also claimed that he saw what looked like other human beings walking outside. And while they were flying around this tower, Also One told him that his people often hunted and fished on Earth. Then they landed and took Carl inside this tower, and they made their way to a room. Then Also One asked Carl to stand on a platform. Then Carl was scanned by some sort of device which came out of the wall, and after this scan, Also One walked up to him and told him that he was not a suitable candidate for their purpose. Whatever that was, I guess we will never know. Then they told Carl that they were going to take him home. And once back on Earth, Also One took back the pills that Carl had in his pocket, and he then told Carl while holding his rifle that he wanted to keep it, but he couldn't because it wasn't allowed. Then Carl just found himself back in the forest. He was very confused and disoriented. He walked for a while and then found what he thought was an abandoned truck, but he later realized that this was his truck. And thankfully he had a CB radio and was able to call up for help. Now Carl was missing for some time, so there was a search party out looking for him. And when they found him in his truck, they saw no tire tracks coming in or going out. It was as if the truck just dropped from the sky, and Carl did later realize that this was not where he parked. Now Carl looked so out of it that his wife didn't even recognize him at first. And during the search, some members of the search party did see strange lights in the sky. And Carl at this time could not even remember what had happened to him. The last thing he remembered was his bullet stopping in midair. It was only through hypnosis did he recall meeting Also One and having their awesome space adventure. Now what's so interesting about this case is Carl's lungs were healed. Previously, Carl had a lot of scarring on his lungs due to tuberculosis, but that seemed to just magically heal while he was out on this hunting trip, as well as other medical conditions. He also saved the bullet and had it analyzed, and the results concluded that it must have hit something harder than rock or a tree, and it was also completely inside out with the lead slug missing. Now, just like most alien abductions, a lot of people thought that Carl was making this up, but he did take a lie detector test, and experts believe that Carl really thought that this happened to him. So we have the bullet, the truck that seemed to just magically drop from the sky, the healing of Carl's medical conditions, as well as members of the search party claiming that they saw strange lights in the sky while Carl was missing. So this is an amazing case, and if true, I wonder why Also One and his friends wanted Carl, and why wasn't Carl a good candidate? Was it because of his previous health problems, or was it something else? And what would happen to Carl if he was a good candidate? Would he have been taken against his will and missing forever? Making me wonder if these aliens are connected in any way to some of these missing 411 cases. Like I said before, when a person goes missing in the wilderness, dogs are always dispatched to that area. But in these missing 411 cases, dogs can't pick up a scent from where that person was last seen. So it's definitely possible that these people were taken from the sky. Another very odd case of a hunter coming in contact with a strange alien being happened in July of 1968. One day, a bow hunter by the name of Jennings Frederick, a United States Air Force veteran, was hunting in West Virginia. And while he was out hunting, he heard a very unusual high-pitched sound. And when he looked in the direction where the sound was coming from, he claimed that he saw the strangest looking creature moving towards him. He said that this creature had semi-human facial features, yellow slanted eyes, long ears, very tiny arms, and its body was slender and green. Basically, it looked like a walking vegetable. And while he was staring at this creature in complete shock, it started to talk to him. But it wasn't talking in English, but yet somehow Frederick could understand what it was saying. And it said, "You need not fear me. I wish to communicate with you. I come as a friend. I come in peace. I need medical assistance. I need your help." Then right after this creature said that, it touched Frederick's arms with its thorny fingers, and it started to suck his blood. And this was very painful, but Frederick couldn't do anything about it. It was like he was paralyzed. He just couldn't move. And while this creature was sucking out his blood through its fingers, Frederick noticed that it started to change. It appeared that his blood was capable of healing it. Then about 2 minutes later, it was done, and it turned around and ran away at incredible speeds. It was also capable of jumping extremely high, like it could defy Earth's gravity. Then it jumped over a hill and disappeared from sight. And once it was gone, Frederick finally snapped out of his frozen-like state, and he just started to panic. And while he was running back to civilization as fast as he could, he heard a very loud humming noise coming from behind him. He believed that this humming noise was some sort of aircraft. Now, once Frederick made it all the way back home, he decided not to tell anybody about this because he knew that people would think that he was completely nuts. But as time went by, he started to feel the need to tell someone. He wanted some answers. And about 10 years later, in 1978, he told the world his story. And of course, most people did think that he was completely nuts or just making things up. But there are a lot of people out there who believe that Frederick was telling the truth. And if this is a hoax, there's no doubt that Frederick has one heck of an imagination, because this is one of the strangest alien encounters that I've ever heard of, and I've heard of my fair share. Now, one thing that stood out to me is Frederick said that this creature he encountered was not talking in English. So maybe Also One wasn't talking in English either, but since Carl could understand him, he thought that maybe he was. Now, there are a lot more out-of-this-world stories of hunters coming in contact with alien beings. So I'm going to make this into a series, as I find these sightings to be extremely fascinating. Until next time, this is Paranormal Junkie. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned.